Evicted? This can't be real.
We'll figure it out together.
Mom, what do we do?
We stay strong. We'll face this together.
Yes, we are strong.
I can help.
We all will.
One in a dark blazer, the other in a city uniform. The morning sun cut across the peeling floor, dust floating in the light like something already leaving. Her son Eli stood behind her, barefoot, clutching his backpack even though school had ended weeks ago. Habit, or fear. When Marsha opened the door, the woman in the blazer smiled in a way that never reached her eyes. "Ms. Carter," she said calmly, "you have exactly 30 minutes to vacate the premises." Marsha blinked. "That's not possible. I told your office. I'm waiting on the assistance check. I just need a few days." The city officer shifted his weight, eyes fixed on the wall. He didn't look at Eli. He didn't look at the half-packed boxes, the second-hand couch, the framed photo of Marsha's late husband taped crookedly near the door. The woman's smile hardened. "Your situation," she said, "is no longer our concern." Marsha felt something tear inside her. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet and final, like paper ripping underwater. Eli whispered, "Mom." Down the hall, neighbors peeked through cracked doors. Phones came out. Someone started recording. And in the far end of the corridor, watching from the stairwell with folded arms, stood the landlord himself, already dialing his lawyer. Marsha didn't know yet that this moment would be on the evening news. She only knew that the lock behind her clicked once, and didn't open again. Marsha Carter knew something was wrong the moment she saw the envelope taped to her door. It was thick, official-looking, stamped with a city seal that didn't belong in a place where the paint peeled and the hallway smelled faintly of bleach and old food. She stood there for several seconds, keys still in her hand, reading the bold black letters again. Final notice. Vacate immediately. Her stomach tightened. "No," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. Inside, Eli was at the kitchen table drawing superheroes on the back of old homework sheets. Jasmine sat on the couch watching cartoons on mute. The apartment was small, but it was theirs. It had been theirs for 6 years. Marsha peeled the notice off the door and stepped inside, heart pounding. 10 minutes later the knock came. Not loud, not urgent, just certain. She opened the door and found 2 people waiting, a woman in a tailored blazer holding a clipboard, and a city housing officer standing half a step behind her. "Ms. Carter?" the woman asked. "Yes. I'm from Reed Property Management. This unit is scheduled for immediate repossession due to non-payment." Marsha swallowed. "That's not true. I spoke to your office. The assistance check is delayed, but it's approved." The woman glanced at her clipboard. "Our records indicate no valid payment has been received." "Because the city is slow," Marsha said, her voice rising. "Not because I didn't pay." The officer cleared his throat. "Ma'am, you'll need to cooperate. We're here to enforce the eviction." Marsha laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. "Enforce? I didn't even get a court date." "This is legal," the woman replied smoothly. "You signed a flexible lease agreement." Marsha felt heat rush to her face. "I signed a lease to live here, not to be thrown out like trash." Behind her, Eli appeared in the doorway. "Mom!" The officer avoided looking at him. Marsha stepped forward. "Please. I just need a few days. My kids." "Your personal circumstances," the woman interrupted, "are no longer relevant." Marsha stared at her. The hallway felt suddenly too small, the walls pressing in. Neighbors' doors cracked open. A phone camera lifted somewhere down the hall. "So that's it," Marsha said quietly. "You just erase us." The woman's expression didn't change. "You have 30 minutes to collect your belongings." Marsha's hand shook. "And if I don't?" The officer finally met her eyes. "Then we change the locks." Silence settled between them. Heavy. Marsha turned back into the apartment. She looked at the couch, the chipped table, the photo of her husband taped near the door. 6 years of living reduced to what could fit in 2 backpacks and a laundry bag. Jasmine began to cry when Marsha told her. Eli stood still, jaw clenched, Too old for cartoons, too young for this. In the hallway, Thomas Reed watched from the stairwell, phone pressed to his ear. Yes, he said softly, eyes on Marsha. It's being handled. When the officer locked the door behind them, the click echoed louder than it should have. Marsha stood there, holding her children, realizing that the city had just decided they no longer existed. The car smelled like old fries and warm plastic. Marsha sat in the driver's seat with both hands gripping the steering wheel, even though the engine was off. The sun had already slipped below the buildings, leaving the parking lot washed in dull orange light. Eli was in the back seat, knees pulled to his chest, scrolling on a dead phone. Jasmine leaned against the window, fogging the glass with her breath and drawing circles with her finger. "Mom," Jasmine said softly, "are we camping?" Marsha's throat tightened. "Something like that." Eli looked up. "For how long?" Marsha didn't answer. She had made 14 calls in the last 2 hours. Social services put her on hold for 40 minutes, then disconnected. The emergency housing line told her there was a waiting list. Her former supervisor at the nursing home said she was sorry, but company policy didn't allow temporary housing. Her sister in Ohio had 3 kids in a 2-bedroom and no space. Every conversation ended with the same tone: sympathy without solutions. Marsha rested her forehead against the steering wheel. "I did everything right," she whispered. "I paid. I worked. I asked for help." Eli leaned forward between the seats. "It's not your fault." She almost broke at that. Her 12-year-old was comforting her. The world had already shifted their roles. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She answered immediately. "Hello, Ms. Carter." Tired male voice. "This is City Housing Services. We received your report." Marsha straightened. Yes, I was evicted today. Have 2 children. We're in our car." Papers shuffling. "I'm very sorry," the man said. "Unfortunately, all emergency shelters are currently at capacity." Marsha stared at the windshield. "So what am I supposed to do?" Another pause, longer this time. "Do you have family or friends you can stay with temporarily?" Marsha laughed, hollow and sharp. "If I did, I wouldn't be calling you." "I understand your frustration," he said gently, which somehow made it worse. "I can put you on a priority list. Someone may contact you within 5 to 7 business days." 5 to 7 days. Marsha repeated. "We don't have 5 to 7 minutes." "I'm sorry," he said again. "That's all I can offer." The line went dead. Jasmine's voice was barely a whisper. "Are they helping us?" Marsha turned around, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack her face in half. "They're trying, baby." Eli didn't say anything. He just looked out the window, jaw tight, eyes dark. They drove for a while with no destination. Past the old apartment, past the school, past the grocery store where Marsha used to budget every dollar down to the cent. At a red light, Marsha noticed a billboard overhead. Luxury living, now leasing. She felt something twist inside her. Not anger, not sadness, something colder. They parked behind a closed community center. The lot was empty, quiet. Marsha reclined the seat slightly so the kids could lie down. "Lock the doors," she said. Jasmine curled up with her backpack as a pillow. Eli kept his shoes on. "Mom," he said after a while, "is this because we're black?" The question hit harder than any eviction notice. Marsha took a breath. "Why would you think that?" Eli shrugged. "We were the only ones on our floor who got kicked out. Mr. Daniels upstairs is 3 months late on rent. He's still there." Marsha closed her eyes. She wanted to tell him no, that it was just bad luck, paperwork issue, a misunderstanding. But the truth sat heavy in her chest. "I don't know," she said quietly. "But I know this shouldn't have happened." Jasmine stirred. "Are we poor now?" Marsha reached back and took her hand. "We've always been careful." "That's not the same thing." "But we don't have a house," Jasmine said. Marsha had no answer. Her phone buzzed again. Text this time. From an unfamiliar name. This is Daniel Brooks. I got your number from a tenant group. I heard what happened today. I'm a housing advocate. If you're safe, I'd like to help. Marsha stared at the message for a long moment. Then she typed back. We're in our car. I don't know what help looks like anymore. The reply came almost instantly. It looks like someone finally paying attention. Marsha looked at her children sleeping in the back seat, their faces soft in the dim light, unaware of how fragile everything had become. For the first time since the lock clicked shut, she felt something unfamiliar rise through the fear. Not hope, but resistance. Daniel Brooks didn't look like Marsha expected. She had imagined someone older, maybe in a suit, someone who spoke in legal language and promises. Instead, Daniel showed up at the 24-hour diner wearing a faded jacket, carrying a laptop bag, and looking like he hadn't slept in days. You must be Marsha, he said, extending his hand. I'm really sorry we're meeting like this. Marsha nodded. You're the first person who didn't start with, I'm sorry, but... Daniel gave a small, tired smile. I tried to avoid the but part. Eli and Jasmine sat in the booth beside her, quietly eating fries. It was the first real food they'd had since morning. Daniel opened his laptop. I've been tracking Reed Property Management for about 2 years. Marsha stiffened. Tracking how? Evictions, he said. Patterns. Complaints. Legal filings. I run a small housing advocacy group. Mostly volunteer work. Marsha crossed her arms. And what does that have to do with me? Daniel turned the screen toward her. A spreadsheet filled the display. Names, dates, addresses, outcomes. These are tenants evicted by Reed in the last 18 months, he said. 73 cases. Marsha leaned closer. That's a lot. Daniel hesitated. 70 of them were Black or Latino. Marsha felt her chest tighten. What about the others? White tenants with similar financial issues. Daniel said. Most were offered extensions, payment plans, delays. Eli looked up from his fries. So they just kicked us out because... Daniel's voice was calm but firm. Because statistically, people who look like you are less likely to fight back. Less likely to get lawyers. Less likely to go public. Marsha stared at the screen, her reflection faint in the glass. So this wasn't random. No, Daniel said quietly. It was efficient. The word landed heavy between them. Marsha felt something shift inside her, like grief rearranging itself into clarity. So what now? She asked. You show me a chart and I just, what? Accept it. Daniel shook his head. Now we document. We file complaints. We talk to other tenants. We build a case. A case for what? For systemic discrimination, he said. Not just what happened to you. What keeps happening? Marsha laughed bitterly. You think the city cares about that? Daniel met her eyes. Not unless they're forced to. Jasmine tugged on Marsha's sleeve. Does that mean we get our house back? Marsha's heart sank. Daniel hesitated just long enough to be honest. I don't know, he said gently. But it means what happened to you won't stay invisible. Marsha looked around the diner. Families in booths, a tired waitress refilling coffee, a TV in the corner playing silent news. The world was moving like nothing had happened. Like her life hadn't just been split in half. What do you need from me? She asked. Daniel slid a folder across the table. Your story. Your records. Any messages, emails, calls with Reed's office. Marsha flipped through the folder. Forms. Affidavits. Legal language that felt like another foreign country. I'm not a lawyer, she said. I'm barely holding myself together. Daniel nodded. That's exactly why this matters. Marsha swallowed. What about the other families? I can introduce you, he said. Some of them are scared. Some already moved. Some still fighting. Do they win? Eli asked quietly. Daniel didn't answer immediately. Sometimes, he said finally. But mostly they survive. The word echoed in Marsha's head. Survive, not live. Not heal. Just survive. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a voicemail from an unknown number. She played it on speaker. Ms. Carter, this is Thomas Reed. I've been informed you've been contacting advocacy groups. I strongly advise you to stop spreading misinformation. Any further actions may result in legal consequences. Silence followed. Eli clenched his fists. He's threatening you. Daniel's jaw tightened. He always does that. Marsha felt fear creep back in, but now it had company. Anger. So he gets to erase us, and now he wants us quiet too, she said. Daniel leaned forward. That's the pattern. Marsha looked at her children. At their tired faces. At the way they were pretending this was temporary, manageable, survivable. No, she said softly. That's the system. Daniel raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Marsha straightened in her seat. Her voice was steady now. I mean, he didn't just take our apartment. He took our safety, our dignity. And he expects us to disappear like everyone else. She paused, then added, We're not going to. Daniel studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. Good, he said. Because once you stop disappearing, people start noticing. Outside, across the street from the diner, a real estate billboard glowed under white lights. Reed Properties. Building communities. Marsha looked at it through the window. And for the first time she didn't feel small. She felt dangerous. Marsha didn't sleep the night before her interview. She lay on the borrowed couch in Daniel's small office, staring at the ceiling while Eli and Jasmine slept on air mattresses beside her. The city hummed outside. Sirens in the distance, buses hissing at stops, people going to work as if nothing in the world was broken. Her phone buzzed again at 6:14 a.m. Local news channel 7. We're sending a crew at 9 a.m. Is that still okay? Marsha typed back yes, then immediately felt sick. You don't have to do this, Daniel said from the doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee. No one will blame you if you change your mind. Marsha sat up. If I don't do it, he wins quietly. If I do, at least he has to work for it. Daniel nodded. That's usually how power works. It prefers silence. The news van arrived with more noise than Marsha expected. Cables, cameras, microphones. The reporter, a young woman named Claire Henderson, smiled warmly but professionally. Just tell your story, Claire said. In your own words. Marsha stood in front of the camera, hands clasped so tightly her fingers hurt. My landlord evicted me and my children without a court hearing, she said. I was waiting on approved assistance. Communicated. Begged for time. They locked us out anyway. Claire asked, Do you believe race played a role? Marsha hesitated. The word felt heavy. Yes, she said. Because we weren't the only ones struggling. We were just the easiest to remove. The segment aired that evening. By midnight, the video had been shared over 20,000 times. Comments flooded in. Some supportive, some cruel. This is why the system is broken. Why didn't she save better? If she was white, this wouldn't happen. Stop playing the victim. Marsha scrolled until her hands started shaking. Daniel gently took the phone away. Don't read the comments. They're designed to hurt, not help. The next morning, Reed Property Management released a statement. We follow all legal procedures. Ms. Carter violated her lease agreement and is spreading misinformation. We sympathize with her situation but deny any wrongdoing. Claire called again. They're framing you as irresponsible. Marsha laughed bitterly. Of course they are. 2 days later, Marsha received an email from a former tenant named Angela Moore. He did the same thing to me. I thought it was my fault. I'm willing to talk. Then another. I have recordings of his office lying to me about extensions. Then another. The story stopped being about Marsha. It became about a pattern. Daniel organized a small meeting at a community center. 5 former tenants showed up. Then 8. Then 12. A man named Robert described being evicted while recovering from surgery. A woman named Keisha said Reed's office told her she was too aggressive, when she asked for help. Every story different, every outcome the same. Marsha listened, heart pounding. This isn't just about housing, Daniel said. It's about how the system decides who deserves stability. That afternoon, Marsha received another call. This time it wasn't the news. It was Reed's lawyer. "Ms. Carter," the man said smoothly, "your public statements are damaging my client's reputation. We advise you to cease immediately." Marsha felt fear flicker, but it didn't take hold. "You evicted my children," she said. "That damaged more than a reputation." "Silence. You're being emotional," the lawyer replied. "This is a business matter." Marsha smiled slightly. "Then you shouldn't have made my life your business." The lawyer hung up. Daniel exhaled slowly. "They're scared now." Marsha looked around the room, at the other tenants, at their tired faces, at the quiet anger filling the air. "I am too," she said. "But not enough to stop." That night, Channel 7 ran a second segment. This time, the headline wasn't about one family. It was about a company. And in Thomas Reed's office, the TV screen reflected in his glasses as Marsha's face filled the frame. For the first time, his phone didn't stop ringing. And none of the calls were in his favor. The email arrived at 2:03 a.m. Marsha was half asleep on Daniel's office couch when her phone vibrated. The subject line was simple: cease and desist. She opened it with a slow, sinking feeling. The message accused her of defamation, of spreading false allegations, of causing irreparable harm to Reed Property Management. It demanded she delete all public posts, stop speaking to media, and issue a formal apology within 48 hours, or face legal action. Marsha stared at the screen until the words blurred. "They want me quiet again," she whispered. Daniel read over her shoulder. His jaw tightened. "They're trying to intimidate you. This is standard corporate pressure." "It doesn't feel standard," Marsha said. "It feels like they're coming for me." The next morning the threats escalated. A letter arrived at Daniel's office addressed to Marsha. Not through email. Not through lawyers. Handwritten. "You should think about your kids. This city isn't kind to troublemakers." Marsha's hands shook as she read it. Eli saw her face and knew something was wrong. "What is it?" "Nothing," she lied, then corrected herself. "It's something. But it's not your job to carry it." That afternoon, two men in suits appeared at the community center where Marsha was meeting with former tenants. They didn't introduce themselves. They just watched from the back. Daniel whispered, "Those are private investigators." Marsha felt her stomach drop. "For what?" "For pressure," Daniel said. "For silence." When she left the building, a black sedan idled across the street. It didn't follow her. It didn't need to. That night, Marsha finally broke. She sat in the bathroom with the door locked, crying silently into a towel so the kids wouldn't hear. The fear wasn't dramatic. It was practical. Rent. Safety. Lawyers. Power. She wasn't just fighting a man. She was fighting a system with money, time, and legal weapons. Daniel knocked softly. "Marsha." She opened the door, eyes red. "I don't know if I can do this." Daniel nodded. "That's the part no one talks about. Justice isn't inspiring. It's exhausting." "What if they take my kids?" she whispered. "What if I lose everything?" Daniel paused. "You already lost everything once. And you're still standing." Marsha laughed weakly. "Barely." The next day, Reed's company filed an official civil complaint against her. The news headline read, "Landlord sues evicted tenant for defamation." The comments were brutal. "She's lying for attention. Now she's getting what she deserves. This is why you don't go public." Marsha turned off her phone. Eli slammed his bedroom door. "Why are they blaming you?" Marsha didn't answer. Instead, she opened Daniel's folder again. Evidence. The spreadsheets. The recordings from other tenants. The truth was there. But so was the cost. Daniel sat across from her. "We can still file a discrimination complaint with the State Housing Board." And then what? Then it becomes official. Investigations, audits, subpoenas. Marsha looked at her hands. And more targets on my back. Yes, Daniel said honestly. But also more protection. Marsha closed her eyes. She thought about the hallway. Ella, Jasmine crying. Eli asking if it was because they were black. She thought about the letter. The men in suits. The car that didn't follow her. Fear pulled her one way. Memory pulled her another. No, she said finally. I'm not apologizing for telling the truth. Daniel exhaled slowly. Then we do this properly. They filed the complaint that afternoon. 2 hours later, Marsha received another voicemail. This one wasn't legal. It was Thomas Reed himself. Ms. Carter, his voice said calmly, you're making a very expensive mistake. People like you don't win these fights. They just get tired. Marsha listened to the message twice. Then she deleted it. Eli watched her. Aren't you scared? Marsha nodded. I am. Then why keep going? Marsha looked at her son. At his tight shoulders. At how quickly he had learned to expect loss. Because if I stop, she said quietly, this becomes normal. Outside, the city kept moving. Inside, Marsha made the most dangerous decision of her life. She chose not to disappear. The courthouse smelled like old paper and metal detectors. Marsha stood in line with Daniel. Her hands clasped around a thin folder that felt absurdly small compared to what this moment represented. Eli and Jasmine sat on a wooden bench across the hall, whispering to each other in voices too quiet for their age. Remember, Daniel said softly, they're going to look confident. That doesn't mean they're right. Marsha nodded, though her stomach churned. Inside the courtroom, Thomas Reed sat at the front row with 2 lawyers and a neat stack of binders. He wore a navy suit and an expression of calm boredom, as if this were a minor inconvenience in an otherwise perfect schedule. He didn't look at Marsha. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Case number 4412, the clerk announced. Carter versus Reed Property Management. Marsha felt the words land in her chest. The lead lawyer for Reed stood first. Your Honor, this case is a baseless accusation rooted in emotional distress, not legal fact. My client followed all contractual obligations. Daniel rose next. Your Honor, we intend to show a pattern of discriminatory enforcement and procedural abuse. Reed finally looked back. His eyes were cool, curious, almost amused. The judge gestured. Proceed. Daniel called Marsha to the stand. She walked slowly, every step echoing. The microphone felt too close. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears. I received an eviction notice without a court hearing, she said. Despite approved assistance and ongoing communication. The lawyer leaned forward. Isn't it true you failed to pay rent on time? I was waiting on city funds, Marsha replied. Which Reed's office confirmed. Do you have proof? Daniel handed the judge printed emails. Reed's lawyer frowned slightly. Then the recordings played. Voices from Reed's office promising extensions. Delays. Understanding. Followed by silence. Reed shifted in his seat. The lawyer tried to regain control. Ms. Carter, are you suggesting this was motivated by race? Marsha took a breath. I'm saying I wasn't treated the same as others. How do you know? Daniel called the next witness. Robert, Isha, Angela. Each told a similar story. Delays, promises, sudden evictions. Daniel presented the spreadsheet. The demographic breakdown. 70 of 73 tenants. The courtroom murmured. Reed's lawyer objected. Correlation is not causation. Daniel replied calmly. Neither is coincidence at this scale. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Reed, would you like to respond? Reed stood. His voice was smooth. My company serves thousands of tenants. It's unfortunate when individuals struggle, but business decisions must remain impartial. Marsha watched him speak. He sounded reasonable. That scared her more than anger would have. The judge paused, then said, This court will allow further investigation. A formal audit of Reed property management will be conducted. Reed's smile faltered for half a second. Just enough. Outside the courtroom, reporters waited. Daniel whispered, "That's huge." Marsha didn't feel victorious. She felt exposed. As they walked down the courthouse steps, a man shouted from across the street, "Liar!" Someone else yelled, "Go back to work." Eli grabbed her hand. Marsha kept walking. That night, the city announced an official housing investigation. Reed's stock dipped slightly. Not enough to matter, but enough to notice. Marsha lay awake in Daniel's office again, staring at the ceiling. This time fear felt different. Less like drowning. More like standing on the edge of something high, unsure whether it was a fall or a flight. The documents arrived in 3 boxes. Daniel stacked them in the middle of the office floor, each one stamped with official city seals. Financial records, internal emails, eviction timelines, notes from city inspectors who had ignored complaints for years. "This is more than I expected," Daniel said quietly. "This is a system." Marsha knelt beside the boxes, flipping through pages. Numbers blurred together. Fees, penalties, legal costs. But one column stood out. Risk assessment low. "What does that mean?" Marsha asked. Daniel sighed. "It means Reed's company flagged certain tenants as unlikely to fight back." Marsha felt her chest tighten. "And we were in that group." "Yes." The investigative journalists from Channel 7 spent days in the office. Cameras filmed stacks of documents, interviews with former tenants, timelines mapped across whiteboards. One reporter, a man named Aaron Klein, looked up from his notes. "We found something interesting." Daniel leaned forward. "What?" City housing inspectors received at least 12 complaints about Reed last year. None resulted in action. Marsha stared at him. "Why?" Aaron hesitated. "Because one of Reed's board members is a major donor to the mayor's campaign." The room fell silent. "So this isn't just about one landlord," Marsha said slowly. "It's about the city protecting him." Daniel nodded. "That's why cases like this disappear." The story aired in 2 parts. The headline changed again. City ignored housing discrimination complaints for years. Protests formed outside Reed's main office. Small at first, then larger. Former tenants held signs. "We paid. We asked. We were erased." Marsha stood at the edge of the crowd, Eli and Jasmine beside her. She didn't chant. She didn't speak. She just watched. A woman approached her. Middle-aged, nervous. "I lost my apartment last year," the woman said. "I thought it was my fault. Seeing you on TV made me realize it wasn't." Marsha swallowed. "I'm sorry." The woman shook her head. "No. Thank you." Across the street, Reed's building glowed with corporate glass and white lights. Inside, executives held emergency meetings. Reed's name trended on social media. Not in praise, in exposure. The mayor's office released a statement promising a full internal review. Daniel laughed bitterly. Translation: they got caught. Marsha received another voicemail from Reed's lawyer. This time the tone was different. "Ms. Carter, my client is open to a private settlement. Compensation in exchange for confidentiality." Marsha listened, then deleted it. He didn't call back. That night, Reed appeared on a talk show. He blamed miscommunication, media distortion, and individual failures. Marsha watched him on a small TV in the office. Eli asked, "Why is he lying?" Marsha answered honestly, "Because the truth costs him more." 2 days later, the city announced a formal ethics investigation into housing oversight. 3 officials resigned. One quietly, one loudly, one under protest. Daniel looked at Marsha. This doesn't happen often. Marsha felt no celebration, only exhaustion. She had become a symbol. And symbols don't get to rest. Outside, the protests continued. Inside, Reed's company stock dropped 20%. Not ruin, but damage. Enough to scare investors. Enough to force silence into boardrooms that had never listened before. Marsha stood by the window, watching people chant her name. She thought about the night in the car. Fries. The fogged windows. Jasmine asking if they were poor now. The system had moved. Slowly. Reluctantly. But it had moved. And for the first time, the city wasn't pretending nothing had happened. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning. Not handwritten. Not threatening. Official. Marsha opened it slowly, her hands steady in a way they hadn't been for weeks. Notice of license suspension. Read property management. Daniel read over her shoulder and let out a breath he'd been holding for months. They did it. Marsha sat down hard on the couch. What does that mean? It means Reed can't operate as a landlord until the investigation is complete, Daniel said. No new leases. No evictions. No property acquisitions. Marsha stared at the page. The words didn't feel real. For the first time since the hallway lock clicked shut, something had actually reversed direction. The news broke within hours. City suspends major landlord after discrimination findings. Reed didn't appear on television this time. He released a statement through his legal team, calling the suspension temporary and politically motivated. But the damage was done. Former tenants filed a class action lawsuit. Investors pulled out. Banks froze lines of credit. Reed's empire didn't collapse overnight. Crack. Marsha received a call from the housing board that afternoon. Ms. Carter, due to your situation and the ongoing case, you and your children qualify for immediate relocation assistance. Marsha closed her eyes. Where? A 2-bedroom unit. Temporary but safe. When she hung up, she didn't cry. She just sat there. Eli walked in. Is it bad news? Marsha shook her head. We have a place. Jasmine gasped. A real one. A real one, Marsha said. They moved in 3 days later. The apartment was small, plain, quiet. But it had keys. It had walls that didn't threaten to disappear. That night, Marsha lay on the floor between Eli and Jasmine's mattresses, listening to their breathing. Safe felt unfamiliar. On the other side of the city, Thomas Reed sat in his office alone. The walls were still glass. The desk still polished. But the phones were silent. His lawyer finally spoke the truth he'd avoided. You're not untouchable anymore. Reed stared at the city skyline. Neither is the city, he said bitterly. The class action suit gained momentum. Evidence poured in. Emails surfaced showing internal discussions about risk profiles and problem tenants. Reed's name was now attached to phrases like systemic abuse, racial targeting, corporate misconduct. The final blow came quietly. The board voted him out. No press conference. No apology. Just a line in a financial report. Thomas Reed resigns as CEO effective immediately. Marsha saw it on Daniel's phone. She felt nothing. No joy. Not revenge. Just a strange emptiness where rage used to live. That's it, she asked. Daniel nodded. That's how power usually falls. Not with drama. With paperwork. Marsha looked around the new apartment. The plain walls. The borrowed furniture. The future that still felt fragile. Do you think he understands what he did? She asked. Daniel thought for a moment. No. But he understands what it cost. That night, the news ran one last segment. Not about Reed. About housing reform proposals. Policy changes. New oversight committees. Marsha's face wasn't on screen. Her name wasn't mentioned. But her story was in every line. And for the first time she realized something painful and true. Justice didn't give her back what she lost. It just made sure someone else couldn't take it the same way again. The apartment smelled faintly of paint and cleaning solution, a sterile contrast to the lingering chaos of the past months. Boxes lined the walls, unopened, reminders of the life Marsha and her children had lost and in some small way regained. Eli sat at the small kitchen table, a notebook open in front of him, trying to make sense of everything. Jasmine, curled on the couch with a blanket, hummed softly to herself, a fragile attempt to create normalcy. Marsha watched them quietly, noticing the subtle ways her children were rebuilding themselves along with the apartment. Daniel had left for the day, promising to check in on the progress of the ongoing lawsuits and housing reform initiatives. The city had begun making real, if slow, changes. Policies were being reviewed, complaints reclassified, and some officials faced disciplinary action. Still, Marsha knew these changes didn't undo the months of fear, humiliation, and loss she had endured. She found herself reflecting on the hallway, the lock, the officer's cold eyes, and Reed's calculated smirk. The images didn't fade. They were etched into her memory, reminders of both systemic cruelty and her own survival. There was anger, yes, but there was also an understanding. Survival had a cost. Her phone buzzed. A notification from the local news outlet. Housing Advocacy Group introduces citywide reform measures inspired by Marsha Carter's case. She opened the article and read through the lines carefully, eyes stinging. The piece didn't sensationalize her suffering. It reported systemic injustice, names of those responsible, and the steps the city would take to prevent future abuse. Marsha leaned back in the chair, letting herself breathe. Her children were safe for now. Justice had been served imperfectly, but it had been served. Still, the trauma lingered, quiet but present, like the subtle ache after a long fight. It was the kind of thing that left shadows in the mind, teaching vigilance, resilience, and the difficult art of cautious hope. Eli finally looked up. "Mom, do you think it's really over?" Marsha paused. "It's never really over," she said honestly. "But it's different now. We survived. And surviving, that's the first step." Jasmine reached for her hand, and she squeezed it firmly. Small gestures, yet heavy with reassurance. Marsha realized that resilience was not grand gestures or public victories. It was these quiet moments of presence, the rebuilding of trust, the slow stitching of broken days into something resembling life. In the weeks that followed, Marsha returned to work cautiously. She shared her story selectively, mostly through advocacy groups, mentors, and other tenants facing the system's weight. Each conversation was a reminder. This battle was larger than her family, but it also confirmed that one voice, one refusal to disappear, could ripple outward. Reed's downfall continued quietly. Lawsuits, fines, and investigations plagued his empire. Investors withdrew, buildings were reassessed, and his name became a case study in unethical practices. For Marsha, that knowledge brought a grim satisfaction. Not triumph, not vengeance, but confirmation that the system could, when forced, reckon with wrongdoing. One evening, as she tucked Eli and Jasmine into bed in their new apartment, Marsha lingered by the door. She looked at the small, modest rooms, the walls now adorned with drawings, school projects, and family photos. Safety had returned, tentative but real. And in that safety, a new resolve emerged. She whispered softly to herself, "We survived. And we'll keep surviving." Outside, the city pulsed with life. Some indifferent no longer. And in that pulse, Marsha found a quiet, powerful truth. The fight against injustice never ends, but each stand, each refusal to vanish matters. Her family had endured systemic cruelty, public exposure, and intimidation. They had faced fear and betrayal. But they were still together, still breathing, still claiming their space in a world that had tried to erase them. The night closed gently around the apartment. Marsha turned off the lights and lay down between her children, listening to their steady breaths. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to sleep. Not as a surrender, but as a momentary reclaiming of peace. Because the city could change, institutions could falter, and injustice could be confronted. But resilience, Marsha knew, was hers forever. The story of their suffering and endurance would remain. A quiet testament, a reminder that even in the shadow of systemic racism, courage, truth, and survival mattered. And though scars remained, so did hope.